Welcome to the Executive Coaching Podcast, where Executive Coach Alicia Cowan will discuss leadership topics and coaching solutions to tackle the most difficult problems that keep you from leading your team to success.
Hey there, executive leaders. It's Alicia Cowan. Welcome back. Episode 93 of the Executive Coaching Podcast. And it's official. School is out. That means summer has started. And so we are in a fresh new season of the year. And I have been talking a lot about this new season and it creating kind of a new start for people. I've had quite a few consults since the last time the podcast is recorded and lots of client sessions as well. And one theme that keeps coming up is the executive calendar. I was working with both a CEO and a COO client separately, but recently on creating what we'll call like an executive ideal week for them using what I'll call the executive calendar blueprint that we're going to talk about on the podcast today. And I think this is a perfect time of year for this. I always say seasons for me represent like an opportunity for a new start. This time last year, I recorded the podcast about having like a summer reset and being able to like use like this midpoint of the year for a fresh start for things. But truly, no matter when you're listening to this, you can really start this at any time. So not restricted to this time of the year. However, I just love the feeling of a fresh season. Typically, it naturally dictates different rhythms and different habits that we have as a part of these seasons. So it just feels like a good time to start. So here's the question that I want to open with. When is the last time, as an executive, you looked at your calendar and you thought, yes, this is exactly what a leader at my level should be doing this week? Strange question to maybe ask yourself, but it's one that we need to answer. And most executives can't answer that question because most executive calendars typically aren't thoughtfully crafted and designed. They're more like they're accumulated. We gather the things that are on our calendar over time. And sometimes we end up in default looking at these calendars and saying, this is not what I want to be spending my time on. As I said, I had a couple of consults in the past week where this topic came up. I have some, clients that are looking at some massive goals that they're going to attain. They're wanting to level up. They're wanting to get the promotion, go to the next level, get a pay raise. They're being succession planned into C-suite leader level roles, and they realize they can't get there with a calendar that they currently have. They can't get there with a time management process that they're using in their current role and in their current level. And some leaders I'm coaching, like I mentioned, are already in the role and still feeling that way. And so I commend the people I'm working with. I commend them. They're doing the work. They're working on it. And so this is a fantastic thing to do. And because it's come up so much in coaching, I know there's more of you that are probably having the same challenge out there. And that's why I want to record this podcast today. And so that's what we're going to talk about. And I invite you, if you are feeling like as an executive, you are challenged, even after all, reading all the time management philosophies, reading all the things out there, if you're still challenged with how do I make this work and what do I do and what are the tactical steps and what is the mindset I need more than anything of how to do this and take hold of my team and take back my time so that I can lead at the executive level that I want, at the skill level and carrying the executive presence that I want because I feel prepared, I feel ready, and I feel solid in how I'm spending my time. It is the number one resource over money that executives have is their time. And that's the type of work that I do. So I invite you. I am actively taking consults for clients. You can easily book something through my website and go to my website and book some time with me, even to talk through where your calendar is at today in a zero pressure situation where we can really start to uncover what is going on for you. But tactically today, then we're going to talk about this. So we're going to talk about the problem here. The first thing I'm going to talk about is your calendar and the fact that it's lying to you. The calendar feels productive. However, it rarely reflects like the real leadership priorities that you have in front of you. So I'm going to talk about what I see come up in coaching. Calendars can be packed, completely full with meetings that could easily be emails or phone calls or delegated and not necessary for that executive to attend. There is zero protected time for thinking, for strategy, or for development of people. And then personal priorities, this is a big one for me, personal priorities to include health, family, rest, recovery, hobbies, like all of that. It's just like living in the margin, and we're trying to fit those things in or forego them altogether, which is more horrifying. And there's a sense of urgency. There's this urgency trap that leaders confuse the sense of busyness and this calendar that is always full, never ending, end in sight. And they confuse that for impact. And this trap has a hold of a lot of us as leaders. How often do we say, to someone, how are you doing? And we get this response of, oh, so busy, busy as ever. No sense of like calm, no sense of like steadiness, no sense of just like ease and space. It's been a long time since I asked someone and really heard that answer. And so here's the deal. Your calendar doesn't just reflect your week and what's on the table and what you have ahead of you for the week. It also reflects your leadership. And right now, the calendar might be telling a story that you didn't necessarily intend to write. Therefore, let's go into making the shift. What does the shift look like? We want to go from being reactive to designed. So let's go from this problem over to what is possible. There are two kinds of executives out there. There are those whose weeks and months and days happen to them. And then there's those who architect their weeks with intention. The difference between these two leaders, it's not time. In fact, all of us have the same exact amount of time in every day, every week, every year. It's design, it's intentional design. And so, what I like to help my executive coaching clients build is what we're going to call an executive calendar blueprint. It is a deliberate, recurring structure that puts your absolute highest priorities first before everything else rushes in and takes the spot. And so let's talk through the 5 pillars of an executive calendar blueprint. And before we get into strategy, people, stakeholders, I do want to start and talk about you as the executive, because in your life and in your organization, you are the asset. An unprotected asset actually depreciates really fast. And I just shared this recently with a COO client of mine, and I think it really hit home for her. She said the phrase, she's like, I've heard that phrase where you say, put on your oxygen mask first, all the time. And I understand conceptually what that means. To put on your oxygen mask first means take care of yourself first before you help others. She's like, but when I heard you talk about a COO or myself as an executive asset, something really hit home. She's like, it's like I equate it to, you know, a really expensive asset, like an expensive vehicle that was, maybe equivalent of the salary that, you're paid to be an executive. She's like, if I had that sitting in the garage, I wouldn't just let it sit there and I would not take care of it. I would not take it in for maintenance. I would, make sure it's cleaned and beautiful and well taken care of and well maintained because it's an asset. And so I want you to really hear me here. You, as an executive, are an asset. You in your life, not just in your organization, to your friends, family, your loved ones, you're an asset. And so every other pillar that I'm about to talk about really depends on understanding this first. And you can't think strategically when you, as a human, are completely depleted. You're not a robot. You can't develop other people in your organization if you are actually running on empty and you're not pouring energy and development into yourself and resourcing yourself. And you can't build relationships when you are barely surviving the week. And so that's why pillar number one that we're going to talk about is a thing that I'm going to call personal sustainability. This is the first thing we want to think about when we're running the executive calendar. We're building the executive calendar. The executive calendar, too, when I'm talking about these pillars that we're going to use, I want you to think of your calendar as like a blank slate, as like Sunday through Saturday, to include your weekends, your time off, and your work time as a blank slate. And when we're building the executive calendar, we're going to think through the pillars to add on to our calendar. And the first one is personal sustainability components. So this comes first. And this is not because it's selfish, exact opposite. It's actually because everything else depends on it. So, what does personal sustainability look like? It looks like exercise, it looks like recovery and rest time, it looks like spending time with whatever loved ones that you have, whether that's friends, family, pets, anyone in your circle, in your community, reflection on yourself. It's not a reward for finishing your work. And so I've heard this so often, leaders putting that off and giving themselves a prerequisite for performing well. High achievers that are in my circle, always the case, high achievers feel like having some sort of life outside of work is a reward for getting this never-ending work done. And so I'll ask you, if someone audited your calendar for evidence that you treat yourself as a really high value asset, what would they find? And one scary example that I will give you, I have an executive client that admitted they had not been to a doctor, preventative maintenance, dentist checkups, anything for years, a multiple of years. And that's scary. Reason why? We want to be able to take care of our health and check our health and make sure that we're optimized. There's actually even executive physicals out there because of how high a value of an asset and how much is riding on an executive, again, personally, professionally. And so, are you putting yourself on your own calendar? That is the first and foremost thing that I want to offer to you. The second pillar is strategic thinking time. This is the first thing cut and is the last thing that is scheduled. I want you to flip that. Ask yourself, when do you actually have time to think? Your brain, the thoughts that come out of it, the strategy that comes out of it, the direction, the vision is actually one of the highest ROIs that you have as an executive. It is truly one of those jobs that is one of your main priorities and one of the highest value things that you can do. And so, when do you actually schedule time to think, not to react, not to respond, just to think? All right, pillar number 3 that you can add to your calendar, as I mentioned, people development. So it can be simple things. It can be one-on-ones, it can be skip levels, it can be coaching your direct reports. So like working through things that they need your advisement or they need your training on, succession planning conversations, all of that talent activity that only you can do. This is not separate from your job. It actually is your job at the executive level. So much of your time investing into other people, leaving behind a legacy of wealth and knowledge, and supporting leaders And especially you are leading leaders that are leading others. It is your job. And if your team isn't growing in the way that you would like, what does that say about your leadership bandwidth? Right. So if you're constantly running on the hamster wheel and doing activities that others should be doing versus spending your time on delegating, teaching, training, growing, really consider, do I have the right amount of time for people development? Okay. Pillar number 4 that we want to put on our calendar, relationships and building relationship capital. So these are all the relationships that help you, again, personally and professionally. So this could look like, do I have enough time on my calendar for building partnerships, cross-functional partnerships in the organization? Maybe it's the board relationships I need to build, any key stakeholders in or outside of the organization. And what happens here is a lot of high performers plateau here. And it's not because of competence, it's actually the opposite. But because relationships and relationship building gets squeezed out of the calendar. And so I actually had a leader that we were talking about networking and business development. She's actually fantastic at building relationships. She's really, really good at it. Clients love working with her. She has built long, loyal relationships with her clients. And the sheer fact of it is, she's like, well, I really don't have time to do this. And I said, well, why not? One of your jobs as CEO and business development can be done during business hours. Like, and she was thinking it had to be done in the margins in her own personal time after work and happy hours, dinners, etc. And it really was surprising to her to actually say, oh, that is part of my job, building relationships, building new client relationships and going out and networking. And so I say this because looking at your calendar, I want you to look at this and say, from a relationship standpoint, whether it's internal, external, personal, who needs 30 minutes of your attention this week that is not getting it? And that question alone can be a powerful thought starter to maybe make you reconsider and think, how am I building the relationships I need to be building at my level? All right, pillar number 5, the last pillar that I want you to take a look at your calendar and look at this executive week is to look at how you're building in operational clarity. So, what that looks like is, do you have decision-making blocks? Do you have focused work time? Do you have time for contained administration time? The goal is not to eliminate this. It's actually to give it a nice, neat little home so it stops bleeding into everything else. I had somebody ask me, they're like, I'm spending all this time doing some of this work, and they were making it a problem, and they were trying to fit it into the after hours and trying to fit it into the margin. And I'm like, no, we can plan for it. There is certain operational time that you need to do, certain administrative things, again, that only you can do, that can't be delegated. There is time where you need to focus and put your head down and do work. And you have to make sure you have time for it. And so asking yourself, is your operational work running inside your schedule or running over it? Okay. So those are the 5 pillars. And now what I want you to do is do a very practical action. If any of this resonated or hit home, we're going to do the audit. So before you go and build and go out to take all these action on these pillars, I want you to look back at what you already have in place. So here's a very practical action. Do a 2-week look back. Pull up the last 2 weeks of your calendar, and you can be honest. You can go further than that if you like, but 2 weeks usually gives you a good idea. Don't go from memory, and ask yourself the following questions. What dominated your time? What was completely absent that perhaps needed a home? What were you doing that somebody else could or should be doing? And lastly, what's the gap between how you spent your time and then how you want to lead instead? And don't forget, like I said, pillar 1, don't forget about that personal protection of your time and including you as the asset. So make sure you're looking at how you are protecting yourself as the asset as a part of that audit. So Once you've completed your audit and you took a look at how you use your time, then you can build your own blueprint. Simple process. You don't need anything complicated. You don't need a new app, don't need a new calendar, no complicated system. Number one, first thing you want to do is just clarify your role at your very highest level. What is it that only you need to do? Where's the highest ROI at your executive level that really is going to make the biggest impact at your level? Then, two, identify the non negotiables then. What recurring commitments are going to define the most excellent leadership for you in your role? What will be the highest ROI? And again, don't forget to include yourself as the asset and think about what recurring commitments can protect you as an asset. So, what are those non negotiables for you? Write those all down. And then three, block those things first. Now, I had a CEO tell me when she went to go start to like work on time blocking, she's like looked at the next 2 weeks and she's like, there is no time. She got overwhelmed. She stopped doing it. Look further out. Typically, the next 2 weeks, maybe even more, the next couple of weeks are usually blocked up. That's just typical from an executive calendar. Look further out. That's when you start to find the margin and you find a like more normal week. But you want to start blocking that time further out before those meeting requests start to come in, before those further out weeks fill up. You want to start looking at time blocks and putting those things in. Then layer in the operational. So things that are normal, meetings, decisions you have to make, administrative time that I mentioned, those get into those remaining spaces. They are not the prime real estate, but you do need to give time for them. One hack I also gave a COO is to put in buffer time, meaning time that there will be unexpected things. Because one of the questions that always come up is, well, what about the things that you can't plan for? Of course, there's going to be those things. Those typically, those typically occur during the week. And personal emergencies, those are more the rarity, but also give yourself time if you need it. I call it either buffer time or overflow time. So things that might be unexpected or overflow, you give it a time slot. So instead of defaulting and being like a victim to it, you actually plan for the unexpected. Lastly, review this monthly. A blueprint, an executive blueprint, a calendar blueprint is not set in stone. It actually is a living framework that evolves as your role evolves. And the goal is never, ever, ever perfection. Ever. I don't think I've ever walked out of a week also saying, wow, that just went exactly according to plan. In fact, most never. So you have to review what went well, what didn't, where do I want to make adjustments? And like I said, the seasons of life to include the seasons in the world and in the external world give us those moments where things might need to shift. So as external factors shift, company shifts, you shift, family situation, friend situation, every community shifts, it's okay to shift with it. That's okay. So be open to making those changes as well. Okay. So I'm going to get closer to a close here, but I want to see a couple of patterns I see. And so a couple examples. I had a client whose entire week was a problem. They were solving for things that were coming up with their team. There was zero strategic thinking time, and they were essentially operating at a level below their title. When we went through, stripped apart the week, redesigned the week, the first thing that we protected was a minimum of 60 minutes on Monday morning to plan and plan not only the coming week to get ready for it, it helped prep them for meetings, get them ready with executive presence, get them organized and focused, and then able to relay that focus to their team. They also were able to prepare for further weeks out and protect further time out. And that one time block changed everything downstream. And so I can see how this is done well. And the leaders that I see thriving with their calendars are the ones who treat their calendar like a true leadership tool and not just a scheduling tool where others are running the show. So this week, I want you to keep things simple. I want you to keep it doable. You cannot overhaul your calendar in one sitting, but maybe give yourself a block, 20, 30 minutes, just 20 to 30 minutes to look at your calendar with some fresh eyes and ask, does this calendar reflect the leader that I am trying to be? And then start small, keep it doable, pick one change, look at one pillar that I maybe mentioned, and protect one block. That one small amount of time, even if it's 20, 30 minutes, you can give yourself that time and pick one thing that you will stop letting crowd out the things that truly matter to you as a leader. All right, friends, you cannot lead at your best from a calendar that was built by everybody else's needs. I want you to protect the asset first. That's you. And design your week as an executive, or somebody else is going to design it for you. And they have been. Okay. All right, leaders, here's the deal. If you want to talk more about this, please don't hesitate to reach out. Like I said, I'm happy to jump on a call. You can book a consult call on my website. It's www.aliciacowancoaching.com. If you go to my website, you can fill out a form, schedule a time to talk with me, and there is a zero pressure conversation to talk about what you're going through, what goals you have, and how we can achieve them together. It's ELISIAKEOWN coaching.com. And as always, friends, thank you so much for listening. Have a good few weeks. We'll see you on the next episode. Bye now.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Executive Coaching Podcast with Alicia Cowan. If you're ready to have an executive coach who's ready to help you lead your team to success, then book an introductory call at aliciacowancoaching.com/call.